Good morning. Happy Easter. Happy Easter. Thank you. It's so good to be with you. What a wonderful congregation. Thank you for being here to be a part of this great proclamation of the resurrection of God's eternal love for us. I am just filled with gratitude and thanks, and that's how I have to start. This is a beautiful place we're in today, surrounded by beautiful music and wonderful people who volunteered their time to make today possible. This is just what's visible to us right now. All week long through what felt like 30 services or so this week. It wasn't that many, but it was a long week. We've had people behind the scenes making sure that everything was taken place and put back in place, and all the dishes were washed for all the services we've had. There were like 400 Easter eggs out on campus just an hour ago. They are all gone now, and hopefully all the candy is also gone. Hopefully none of it came back to my house. It's been a wonderful week, and that is only possible because of the maybe 100 to 150 or so volunteers who put their hard work and their ministry effort into making this happen. And so if you would just join with me briefly before the sermon actually starts and give them a round of applause and say thank you. Hours and hours and hours went into it, and we are grateful for making a day like this possible. Days like this are so important for us, especially as they or when they stand in contrast for us to other experiences that we have in life. When they stand in contrast to the hard days, when days like this become a little taste of heaven, a little taste of the day of the resurrection, and the other days feel like Good Fridays. The other days feel like Holy Saturdays. These days of contrast are so much more important for us. If you would, permit me for a moment, an excursus, a memory worth sharing, I think anyway. I remember well, being about 12 years old or so, when I encountered for the first time what I would call the real Van Morrison. There is the Van Morrison that I had already encountered, the brown-eyed girl Van Morrison, but that's not the same. I encountered the 90s Van Morrison, a very different Van Morrison. I was like 12, and so I thought this was the ancient elder Van Morrison who probably was getting close to his later days on this earth. It turns out he was about 42 at the time. Suddenly that's not as old to me as it used to be. Don't know what happened there. Anyway, this ancient man that I encountered in the 90s, Van Morrison, then had written some different music. Avalon Sunset had come out. Days like this, gosh, smooth and joyful and melodic. Great horns, not as good as y'all, but good horn section. And a saxophone solo from Van Morrison himself. He wailed on that thing, and it was so good. And then the lyrics. You don't need to worry. When you don't need to worry, there'll be days like this. When no one's in a hurry, there will be days like this. Not enough of you are nodding your head. I'm going to have to start singing. There's a reason I'm not sitting in the choir loft. You know this song, right? Okay, good. You just spared your fellow pewmates. When you don't get betrayed by that old Judas kiss, oh, my mama told me there'll be days like this. Years later, that song would sit for me on Spotify playlists whenever I have people coming over, like company coming, and we were just going to have like cocktails in the living room. That's the kind of song that I wanted playing on the speakers. I've done like 100 weddings now. That's been at almost every wedding reception. Just sounds joyful and good, and it is. Years later is when I would finally discover that song had also been something of a theme song for the peace process in Northern Ireland. I had no idea. I mean, I was vaguely aware that was a thing because there was also U2 and all this other stuff going on in the 90s, but I really didn't understand. The troubles that had taken place in Ireland for decades had caused the deaths of thousands upon thousands of people, maybe up to 4,000 or so. It was fundamentally a political conflict. It was couched in terms of a religious conflict. You probably are familiar with that, Protestants versus Catholics. But it was about sectarian violence. It was about political power. It was about so much more than just religion. And it was only with the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 that the thing was resolved, though I'm sure there are still plenty of unresolved issues in the conflict to this day. What you may remember, and what I did not know at the time, was that in 1995, President Bill Clinton had gone to be a part of the peace work there. It was a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Belfast. Van Morrison played Days Like This. Bill Clinton offered to play the saxophone solo and was urged not to for his safety. I'm sure that's why. Anyway, he's a talented saxophone player. The end of the violence was still 2.5 years away. The song offered that night wasn't declaring a world that is good. It's longing for a world that is no longer experiencing the suffering of the present moment. It must have seemed like an absolutely foolish exercise to people who were gathered there that day, that evening. Why even light this Christmas tree, truly? Why act as if all is right with the world while sing songs like this? The world is burning around us. Why would we be so foolish? Van Morrison's song, Days Like This, is a song for Holy Saturday. For that period between Good Friday and the first experience of the real light of Easter warming our skin. That light falling on us, giving new light to the world. Morrison would say there will be days like Good Friday, yes, but there will also be days, my mama said, like Easter Sunday. And there will be plenty of days in between. You know those days. You have lived those days. Some of you are living that day today. A question for us is whether or not we will be able to keep our hope for that future, keep our longing alive when the Easter light has not yet risen upon us. That's a central question of the New Testament. I'm not just making it up, I promise. Luke is asking that question today as we read his account of that Easter Sunday. For some of us, the answer is no, I don't know how to keep that hope. I want to, but as of yet, I just can't imagine holding on to it that tightly. Death and violence, the perversion of justice that led to Jesus' arrest, the mockery of a legal process that ended with his carrying his own cross all the way to the place of his execution. Among the disciples who knew him so well, who still had hope? Most of them that morning were either fleeing, on the run, or in hiding, hoping to escape what they believed would be inevitable, that death and violence would be coming for them too. Some women, the ones named today, were courageous enough to be the first ones to leave and go to that tomb. But even they expected in that tomb to find a body. They brought with them the perfumes and oils and spices needed to anoint him for burial, because the burial on Friday had been done hastily. When they got there, they found what the other Gospels refer to as angels. Luke just calls them young men in dazzling white clothes. You can see how those things are related, I hope. And the tomb is empty. What those angels will say to them is this: remember. Remember. Remember what he has told you. that there would be a Good Friday, there would be a Holy Saturday, and yes, there would be an Easter Sunday too. You must remember there will be days like this. And they did. They held in their minds the memory of what Jesus had taught them, what Jesus had commanded them, what Jesus had showed them with his own life. And that made the difference for them in their experience of Holy Saturday moving into Easter Sunday. There would be others later that same day who would hear him speak. There would be others who would break bread with him or recognize him in the breaking of bread. There would be some later who would experience touching the body of the risen Christ. But early in the morning, that first morning before the light of Easter was fully in their eyes, their work was to remember. Remembering is an antidote for despair that they had walked to that garden with. The movement from that despair, the darkness of Good Friday, to the hope and light, the renewed hope of Easter required remembering his words, remembering his love. But it's important to note that there are different ways to remember. There is remembering that keeps us squared up with the past, completely oriented with our heart, mind, soul, and strength to just the past. And then there's remembering that turns us toward the future, toward hope. Which one would they choose? They could have gone there and memorialized the place, their memory serving to make another tomb, a tomb for their own spirits. But they didn't. They could have turned it into a museum, put a brass plaque on the wall. Here laid Jesus of Nazareth, an insightful teacher, a charismatic preacher, a loving healer. We sure do miss him. And that would have made their tale all the more idle. But the angel said, "Do not look for the living among the dead. This is no museum. Do not continue to face back toward Good Friday any longer, but look ahead. Look for the light of Easter coming over the horizon, and let it change you." Much of their experience and much of our experience too would tell us that Good Friday frequently gets the last word. We know the lines of the Van Morrison song just as much because we have experienced their shadow form. There are plenty of days where we have known the betrayal of a Judas kiss. There are plenty of days where we have seen the puzzle pieces fall, and it seems as if they will never fall into place. But then we have days like this. We have days so filled with joy, with love, with the light of Easter. For the tomb to be empty, for Easter to be Easter, we must do more than just put a plaque on the wall, but let the memory of Christ's love and life stir in us and turn us away from the shadowy days to the light of new hope. I hope that's what you came here for. Surely you didn't come to visit the archives, to put another plaque on the wall, to check the box and say, "I did my Easter thing." Surely you didn't come to hear an idle tale or to seek the living among the dead. I know that some of you came hoping for hope. You didn't come to hear a saxophone solo in the midst of a civil war. You came because you either hope or you know that Christ's love and life can change everything. That's why I'm here. To let it change us, we will have to let the memory in us be stirred. We will let these prayers and these songs and these stories take us back, but more than that, we will let them take what is back and bring it to the present. We live in a world filled with contrast, filled with Good Fridays, filled with crosses, filled with the shadowy darkness of Holy Saturday. And we get to experience days like this. May the memory stir in you. May the song stir in you. May the memory propel you. Let our experience of this glorious day and our Easter proclamation send us out into the Good Friday and Holy Saturday world, that we might share something of what we know, what we've learned, what we've remembered. Tell the world that because of what God has done in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, there are and there will be days like this. That God has made it possible that there will be days like this forever. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen.